Welcome to Resource Thursday with T-Minus365. I'm your host, Paco Lebron. This is a place to learn how to run your IT service business, whether you're a one-person shop or leading a team for the journey. This is the place for you. Let me go ahead and introduce my co-host. We have none other than Rick Smith over at Renactus Technologies. Rick, how are you today?
Doing good, man. Can't complain. Happy Thursday to you. How are you?
Happy Friday, Junior, indeed. I appreciate that. No, things are good. I cannot complain because no one will listen. But I think it's a gloomy Thursday in Chicago here. But you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it over the snow and or rain that usually comes over us here. But super excited today. We have Nick Ross over at T-Minus365. Nick, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. And for those that have seen Nick's name around, you may have seen him floating around in the space as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about his channel and his community over at T-Minus365. But before we go into that, I'd like to talk about probably one of my favorite things. Rick, is it probably one of your favorite things too?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
All right. Well, you guys know what that means. That is about TechCon Unplugged. TechCon Unplugged will be at Woodbridge, New Jersey, September 7th through the 10th at the Delta Hotels in Woodbridge. Join us for an evening mixer as we kick off 2.5 days of content. And yes, you heard that properly. That is 2.5 days of content this year to help your business save money, save time, and improve services. This show is for any sized IT solution provider, as mentioned in the intro. Whether you're an emerging MSP or a veteran in the space, this is the place for you. Tickets are for sale, early bird pricing of $199. Get your tickets now over at techconunplugged.com. And we'll be having some more announcements, sponsors that will be joining us, some new, some returning, and some great guests and speakers that'll be joining us as well. So we will see you there later this year. All right, Nick, appreciate you sitting through our little spiel there. But again, really appreciate you coming out. I think that a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, may know your name, have seen you around in the channel and in the community. I know that for you, for me, you have helped me out quite a bit with a guide that you had created probably I think it's a couple years, if not a year ago, that really helped us help maintain the standardization of our Microsoft 365 tenants, where we can defederate off of those that are reselling from like GoDaddy and provide a more user-friendly experience for our clients. And use that guide all the time. I know you created a YouTube video channel on that, but kind of reeling it back in, why don't you talk a little bit about more about yourself for those that don't know who you are and how you kind of came into the space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the channel now for about 6 years. I actually started my path in the channel at PAX8. So I was roughly number employee 40 or so at PAX8. So really early on in the first of beginning phases of PAX8. And we were actually at that time manually provisioning Microsoft, and then it just started doing that. So it was a really fresh time. The company was still at infancy stages of wondering if we were going to take off or not. But I had come from a background in finance and really wanted to change up my career path a little bit. So I had a little bit of background with tech, but not extensively. But being at PAX8, I obviously experienced heavy growth, in the industry, and was exposed to tons of MSPs all over the country. In a lot of my area, at least in the initial stages, and even in the later stages of my career there, was partner facing. So we did a lot of things for partners in the sense of, just standing up services. But then I moved into more of a professional services role. So I was doing a lot of project work for even email migrations. I did a lot of GoDaddy migrations then in my time too, as well as just architecting solutions in Microsoft 365. And then from there, I kind of moved into a product management role where I was working on a lot of things with our dev team to roll out to our community. So a lot of those PSA integrations I was part of as well too, that we had, at PAX8 with ConnectWise and Autotask and Kaseya and Synchro and all the popular PSA tools. That was kind of a game changer at that point in time for billing reconciliation, and it's still a very popular piece of what PAX8 has today. And then we moved into more of the development side, just for all the other things we were doing for the growth. So during my time there, we grew from that 40 employee range to about 1,300 as well. So it was crazy to be part of, and it was really fulfilling as well, though, too, just because I knew we were helping the community a lot.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, there's my phone chatting at me.
Dang Siri, she always does that to me too.
Yeah. So, during that time, I learned a ton about the space, and I obviously saw some needs as well too for education around Microsoft. And Microsoft was always my focus, just because that's where we were doing the most volume. So since that time, as far as catching up to where I'm at today, I went and took some time off after PAX 8, after we hit a kind of a unicorn status, and really wanted to kind of explore what was next for me. And then I joined another MSP as a CTO for about 6 months, and was there and really helping a lot of the technology efforts around what we were doing, which was Microsoft focused. And that was an MSP out of Salt Lake called Summit Technology. And then most recently, I've transitioned into a role as a VP of product development at a MSP called SourcePass, which is based out of New York. And really leading a team of individuals to help build a proprietary customer portal for our clients. So definitely technology focused, definitely Microsoft focused. But that's kind of like the state of my changes throughout the channel over the years.
Nice. Perfect. And I think from that transition, you also started creating a channel and a community for your following, because I think, when you were at PAX 8, a lot of people just contributed to the amount of knowledge and just your way of not only discovering or creating things for the community, but the way you explain it, right? And being able to kind of, lack of a better term, dumb it down so that for those that are just trying to get into the space or just try to make something work, it hit. It allowed people to really kind of go through. Can you talk a little bit more about T-Minus365, how you kind of came up with the idea? I would love to know about the name and just how the channel kind of grew from the idea that you started from while kind of going through.
Yeah, so it kind of started, the T-Minus brand started as a blog that I still have today as well too, that a lot of people access. But I was really seeing a need in the space for Microsoft content geared for MSPs and the SMB space, really, because Microsoft docs all cater to enterprise level companies, and it's really hard to bridge the gap between the two sometimes, and realize like how this technology could help me from a value add standpoint, or even just implementing it. In general, it's not like we're going to be, deploying it to thousands and thousands of users at a company. It's a much smaller scope. So there's different things that you want to do. So part of it was that, just seeing the need of, that type of content in the industry, along with, how does this integrate to my tool set that I use today? Because every MSP is not obviously just using Microsoft. There's tons of tools that we're using, and a lot of that is, encompassed around PSA tools, but also, security tools, things like that. And I wanted to show how these things could be integrated well, because that provides a lot more value to Microsoft in that way for you. And you get a lot more ROI when you talk about, doing those types of integrations. And then the other part of it was just really to brain dump. Like, I had all this information in my head, and I really wanted to get it out on paper so that I could also reference back to it as well too, because it's really hard to keep that in your head. Like, I even reference my own videos today sometimes for things that I haven't touched in 6 months or a year, just to get a quick refresher, because there's no way you can just internalize all that and keep that in your head. So I started the channel just to do that. And, I didn't have any video editing skills or anything like that, but I was just getting content out there. And it started to get a lot more attraction just from me posting in, communities like the MSP Reddit and things like that. I've actually had the most organic growth just from posting in MSP Reddit. So it took off from there, and I really try to refine the videos over time to pick out topics that were relevant to the space. And like, some of them have been more timely than others that are much more attractive, that are like impending Microsoft changes. When you think of things like the partner program changing, or NCE changes, and things like that, those come up a lot. And the GoDaddy video, is by far one of my most popular, just for showing how to defederate and get off of GoDaddy. So, I was writing content for PAX 8 as well too, and some guides, for security hardening for 365, things like that. But, I really wanted my own outlet to have my own voice in certain ways as well too. So I did a lot of that. And, you know, the return has been great, you know, just receiving great feedback from the community and really understanding that it was truly helping. So that's what's kind of intrinsically propelled me to keep going at the channel. And the channel still grows today at like 400 users a month organically without, you know, me marketing anything, which is really cool too, just to see that people are, you know, still pulled into the content. And you know, since I'm working at an MSP, when I was at PAX 8, I obviously like had a lot of exposure to what a lot of MSPs have as far as their pain points and you know, the topics that we need to dive into that could really help from you know, a Microsoft perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny because as I mentioned, so that guide or that video specifically, and I've made reference to it already before quite a few times because that's how impactful it's been for our business. I forgot what group I was in, and everyone just kept complaining on, you know, someone had provided the guidance of, yeah, just call them and tell them that you need to do X, and they're like, they're not going to do it. And they're not going to do it. And I remember the post that you put, you're like, look, I'm tired of hearing this. Here's how you're going to go ahead and do it. And then you just kind of listed all the steps, and everyone just kind of, you know, was just amazed. And the guide was over on, as you mentioned, as a resource while you were at PAX 8, et cetera. So I remember having to do it again. And I went over to PAX 8, I'm a PAX 8 partner, and I logged in and I was like, where's the guide? The guy's not here anymore. So I was like, oh no. So when I Googled it, that's when I ran into your channel, and then I was able to find a video and kind of ran through there, and that's why I knew more about T-Minus365, subscribed, and then, you know, you had so much content over the last you know, however long that the existence of when I found the channel, the last couple of years, and it's been really impactful for us. Rick, as far as you know, I think everyone has a love, hate, or both relationship with Microsoft. How often are you looking at resources to try and help your knowledge and improvement? Because Nick just kind of just really summed it up, is, you know, we're all, you know, majority of us are utilizing the Microsoft services, but half the time we don't even know where to start. B, they rename things and change things so often that what we thought we knew ends up changing to something else as well. So talking a little bit more about kind of like your relationship with Microsoft these days with your MSP.
Well, it's kind of the love hate or the necessary evil, right? Or I don't want to say evil, but you can't, you know, as much as Microsoft, as much as Microsoft can be a pain in the butt with certain things, you need them, right? We can't really, we need them. So we have to develop that fine line of what you need from them, and using them, and also accepting the quirks and the pain in the butt that comes with it. So, you know, that's all it is. But again, when we have, you know, and Nick made a great point. When you go to read a document from Microsoft, it's like, you know, and I consider myself a pretty technically knowledgeable guy, but it's still like reading, you know, the fine prints of building a rocket ship or something. You know, it's not spelled out. It's not written for me. So, you know, having someone basically like Nick making that translation, as we say, for us to understand it in typical geek speak or typical technical speak, makes a lot of sense, and it definitely helps us out.
Very good. Very good. Now, Nick, when it comes to kind of like the content that you know, you said that you kind of understood some of the pain points, you understand a little bit from your time at PAX 8. Is there any of the content that you've created that maybe adheres to you a little bit more, and you post, like, so for example, I noticed that you put a lot of Microsoft and Synchro videos together, right? And for transparency, as everyone knows in the channel, me and Rick use Synchro, and so being able to implement some of those things have been really awesome. Is there anything that you find that motivates you, that you're trying to achieve personally, that, like, or I guess what spawns the ideas outside of the pain points to want to put that content? Because there's so many of them, right? And there's so many ways of doing it. How have you kind of decided to put that content on the channel?
Yeah, I think it's kind of evolved over the years. And real quick, just a funny story about the GoDaddy stuff before I get into that. The reason why that the GoDaddy article was pulled down at PAX 8 is because GoDaddy actually tried to sue PAX 8 because of that article. So
really,
it was a sticky situation there, and that's why it's also good that I run independently. You know, then like you're not trying to come out at least yet to come and speak to me about the article. But yeah, so the actual content itself is, a lot of the day to day, during the business, as far as what, I'm seeing, or sometimes it's just what I'm exploring from a POC perspective. But at PAX 8, it was usually like trends that I was seeing in MSPs that we were talking about, where I saw a huge need to provide video content around that. And at the MSPs I worked at, it's just usually a lot of things that we're working on at that time, or some of the pain points that we have that I've worked on solving with the team, that are relevant as far as the space goes. And I always try to get ahead of big Microsoft changes as well too, just to give as much information as I can. Like with NCE, even though that was a nightmare, and my content was like outdated after a week because they kept changing the program. That was frustrating, but at least it was like, hey, this is how NCs could affect your PSA tools. Nobody's making that kind of content. So I was like, this is, something that you would want to know. And I had the exposure from talking to hundreds of partners at PAX 8 about how the PSA tools were going to, be impactful to them. And, it's like a broken record the amount of times I talked about it. Same thing with the, Microsoft partner changes and things like that, or GDAP, that's coming in this year as well too. Those types of things are heavily impactful from maybe even, not only an operation standpoint, but financial standpoint. So those are the ones I like to gravitate towards that are going to hit a wide audience, and be helpful. But I love just like I'm my own geek in my own way, and I love just playing around with the technology and seeing where I can create efficiencies and automation, especially with the tools that we use today. Like at SourcePath today, we use ConnectWise. So there might be more videos coming out about ConnectWise now, because at Summit we use Synchro as well too. So, it's also the accessibility to those tools is what's helpful to me. I could probably work with the PSA tools just to get sandbox accounts, but typically I want to do things that are going to benefit me twofold, one in my job and one on the channel. So yeah.
No, that makes sense. Now, kind of talking about that that's kind of interesting, funny and ironic about the GoDaddy stuff, because I have heard stories where even over at our colleague Marvin B over at IT Business Podcast, he had a guest that I guess they advertised that, hey, bad. I don't know if they badmouth GoDaddy or how that wording was, but basically like, hey, let's switch you over, and they actually came after them about kind of disparaging them on the way that they were doing that. And so now I see a lot of advertisements for it, and I think about that. So it's interesting that you had mentioned that. Yeah, GoDaddy doesn't like their lunch being taken. That's definitely for sure.
Yeah, I think the lingo that I used that maybe was offensive to them was like, you can call them and, you'll get pushed around the teams that don't know what this is. And, it's like, that's the hook though, that gets you, like, because everybody can relate to that in the MSP space. It's like, yes, like I did that. So I didn't want to take stuff like that out, but I think that kind of language is definitely where they're like, yeah, I don't want to have this,
I don't want that to look at. Yeah, no, that can definitely be yeah, I can see that for there. Now, as far as obviously you've kind of talked a little bit about the Microsoft content that you kind of gravitate towards and kind of go from there. Is there anything right now, Microsoft wise, that really either you're planning to make some content on it, or you've recently made some content on that a lot of MSPs or IT solutions providers should really pay attention to right now, or maybe something cool that has come out that you're thinking, you know what, this is really cool, this is why you should pay attention, and here's why? Is there anything like that that's coming or you have done that you can share, and then maybe even go back to the channel to check out?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things I'm working on and getting into this year. I'm starting to create courses as well, just to help people get acclimated to certain technology stacks or solutions. So I built out a whole Intune course that I'm going to be publishing soon, which is just kind of like an introductory course to getting acclimated. But there's also a focus on Apple device management, just because I think that whole world of Intune is really ambiguous and hard to understand. And honestly, like the Apple device management videos I have on my channel are the most popular with Intune. And not a lot of people in the space yet are adopting Apple device management with Intune, but I think a lot of it comes from the things that you don't know when you get into that and the whole integration with Apple Business Manager and managed Apple IDs. It's like a whole nother world that you have to learn. So that's coming out. That's something I'm pretty excited about because it's more structured and just kind of a accelerator course to get you up and running on the latest with Intune, including like some of the latest features with the Winget integration for app deployment and things like Windows Auto Patch and all that. So I have sprinkled videos in my channel about some of these features, but wanted to have a little bit more structure of somebody that can go through that. The other big thing that I'm working on right now is a comprehensive security playbook for mapping Microsoft 365 security to compliance controls. So it's really just taking in, all of the various suite security settings that you can configure. Like we all have our checklist and, things like that you can do. But with the shifts in, regulatory compliance and things like that, I think the one thing that I wanted to do is map it to, CIS controls. CMMC is big. So I wanted to map it to that because that's becoming more stringent as of this year for enforcement. And then, like if you think about GRC tools, or automation around them, they automate a little bit of the Microsoft offering. Like usually like they'll tap into a little bit of Intune, a little bit of Active Directory, but it's not like what we've seen from past audiences. And so I did post a video about like the new Scuba report from CISA on my video, which is basically an assessment you can run in your Microsoft tenants that spits out a report and says like, here's the controls that you're meeting and here's the ones that you're failing at for this tenant, which is nice. And it's a little bit automated. But I wanted to have that on a broader scale for the entire solution stack that you might be adopting and keep up with, I guess, also the end user experience with that as well, too. So like the big thing that I like to do in my articles and videos is show you end user impact, because obviously like you can't just start flipping on these settings and expect that to work. So part of the guide is going to include like some end user communications you could send out as like a drip campaign as well, just to give you some ammo about like, hey, we're going to turn on number matching for MFA. Like this is what you're going to see. This is when it's going to happen. Those types of things, so people know what to expect. So I'm pretty excited about that as well too. And then lastly, there's there's content about new technology like ChatGPT as well too. So that's a big rage right now as far as like how we can leverage that for automation. So I posted a video a couple weeks ago just about how I did a POC with integrating ChatGPT into Microsoft Teams as like a support application. And so I built a Teams application and I modified, the source code of that because Microsoft has these little templates you can use for that. And I use the OpenAI API, which is what ChatGPT uses to basically, answer people's questions as a first line of defense for chat support. And so it was pretty cool, and I think we're actually going to try to institute that in our MSP as far as providing that as a first line of defense. But there's some questions that we have to answer, obviously, as far as like cost behind that. And obviously like how end users are perceiving that as being helpful or not. But, the answers are pretty good in most cases, just from general testing. But I think, a lot of MSPs are speculating on how that type of technology can be helpful in their business. And a lot of people are gravitating towards the marketing side because it does write, helpful content for you in that sense. And I think that's a great path to go down to as well. I'm personally using it a lot for my channel to help supplement a lot of the things that I'm looking to do, like, write some boilerplate intros for blog posts and things like that I spend a little bit more time with personally, but then I just sprinkle in, the value of what I know and everything in it. So it's just helping me speed up a lot of my processes. So lots of cool things going on, but I'm kind of like a squirrel in some cases, with the attraction. And I think a lot of people are with technology, but it's like, oh, this looks cool. And, I'll go dive into that for a little bit, or I really want to know a little bit more about, these security controls with, the endpoint manager admin center, and I'll dive into that. So, it's great to have, I guess, like, at least the passion behind it. Cause then I'm not bored or, just doing things for the sake of trying to create content, and having that impact. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and so there's so much to unpack there, right? Because I think everything you've talked about, we've all either considered or try to think about at one point or another. I think one big piece that you just mentioned is like Intune, right? We all want to love Intune, but man, is there so many things you got to try and get that going on just one tenant alone. and then to duplicate that across all of your clients. And it's all a manual process. The hope is Lighthouse will get there, right, and be able to kind of get that going. Now, Rick, you're still using Intune for your clients. I know we kind of ran through this project about a year ago or so and trying to implement it. When it comes to Intune right now, do you feel that you are just scratching the surface on what you're doing with things? And if you are, what are some things you wish you could figure out how to do with it to make your job a little bit easier?
Well, again, it's what you said. It's kind of all right. I'm going to say honestly, it's a pain in the butt. And the reason being, I think the potential is awesome for what it, once you get it set, I think what's there is awesome. But it's to the point where I've been frustrated enough to not put clients on it for the simple fact that it is a repetitive process. There's nothing automated about it. Different windows. So we're currently in-house running it, and I'm running it on 2 other clients, right? And those are because, quite honestly, Paco, these are the 2 that you walked through with me to set up. And since then, I've been like, forget it, So I see great potential. I hope Lighthouse bridges that gap that that keeps me gun shy from fully deploying it. But at this point right now, it's just a little bit it takes more from me than I think is worth, if that makes sense time wise.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's a lot of feedback, and nobody's at a state right now where it's ready to replace their RMM at any point, no matter how well we get with administration of it, it still is like not so great at scripting, like pushing PowerShell scripts out to the devices is kind of a nightmare compared to what you get with a typical RMM tool. But I do actually have a lot of attraction from the Microsoft team, and I work with them currently today with Lighthouse, as in giving them feedback about the product, because I think, like we've all noted, that it's just not enough, for us to live in that ecosystem and use Lighthouse for day-to-day management of what we're doing, because there's not enough utility for that to be good enough for the MSP. And so that's why tools like CIPP came out from Kelvin Tiegler, if you're familiar with that, but it's a popular tool in the community that he built, open source, which gives you a little bit more multi-tenant management capabilities for Intune, like, redeploying the same policies that you've created in one tenant in another. And the same thing with like deploying applications down to devices through there and things of that nature. So it's giving a little bit better way to manage the deployment, but there's a ton of base level benefits you get, like conditional access and device compliance is just like, one that's pretty good to have, obviously, for, preventing access on devices that aren't compliant, or at least seeing the telemetry of, devices that aren't up to your standards. But then they have that whole mobile application management side, or the MAM side of the house, which you can use to like help prevent or protect really corporate data on personal cell phones. So that people who are accessing corporate applications, like, have that data protected. You could wipe the corporate data after they leave. You can have them use a PIN to, log into it. It's all encrypted as well too. So people can still access corporate applications on their personal devices, but you have a little bit more security around theirs too. And that's pretty lightweight to deploy within Intune. So there's like low touch things I always encourage, but totally agree with you, Rick, that, a lot of it's a struggle from an administrative overhead standpoint. It takes a lot of hours to replicate the things that you're trying to do through there versus doing that in RMM tool today.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I think it's powerful though, but again, if we can figure that out, I think we're good to go.
Yeah, no, fingers crossed. I think we're holding out too for Intune to get into what we call prime time, right? And I think that my big concern is trying to train my team on how to do it, to understand it as much as I have. So, we've since are moving to another identity provider, but the goal is, once it's ready to be easily trainable, with the KISS principle, we'll definitely look back that being that we're a Microsoft house as well. But before we kind of round out the show, and I know this is a lengthy topic, and we'll probably have to have you back, Nick. Is you mentioned ChatGPT and how you're looking into it to really, help you at your MSP? And is this something that makes sense to kind of go down the road? Is your idea of where, it's a chat for unplanned work of people that are having issues to help get resolutions for it? Or are you referring to maybe more business project work where it's in the way of they have a new user that needs to be onboarded because they're hiring next Monday? And then the idea is that through this chat interface, it will hopefully fully provision a user and spit back to them, hey, here's your credential, here's a license, et cetera, et cetera. Is that kind of the future of what you're looking to kind of have with ChatGPT immediate? Or is there more simpler things that you're trying to implement to kind of help with bigger outcomes for the MSP?
Yeah, that latter topic is interesting. I haven't really thought about that being the applicable use case. Right now, where we're at is really just thinking of it as a first line of defense for support issues, and people coming in and asking questions about, like, how can I do this in Outlook, or how can I change this thing, or my Outlook's not working. What can I do to try these or troubleshoot at least? So it works okay for that, and you can get modifications of the settings to get more accurate but more wild answers, which is kind of interesting. So it's like you can tune it up how you want to try to get more delivered approach versus, like, it may be more accurate if you could let it go more wild, but it could also just be completely off basis. So it's really early in its infancy. I just think that because of the attraction and the amount of investment going into it, not only from OpenAI, but also like Microsoft, as you guys have probably seen in the news recently, with their billions of investment dollars that are going into it. It's going to keep evolving, and it's built into Azure as well too. So we're going to see definite changes, but I'd love for it to be able to trigger off automation workflows and things like that, like you mentioned, for common tasks that we could script behind it recognizing those types of things, or even taking those things and automating them for us. Like, how far is it actually going to go is the use case. But we want to start small, want to start conservative, just because of obviously we want to still keep the perception being for end users to be using something useful, not, oh well, this thing just spits out random stuff that doesn't really help me and I have to contact support anyway. So as long as it's showing promise, there is an investment we'll keep leaning into.
Gotcha. Well, before we end up the show, we usually like to give some type of tangible item, takeaway, homework, etc. Is there one Microsoft thing that you have been able to achieve with ChatGPT that's your favorite outside of the app that you've custom built?
I can't say so. Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah, just the custom app, and just having the API available where we could integrate it in different parts of our own proprietary IP and things like that.
Roger that. All right. Well, I'm gonna hold it to you for next time to see if you find any cool things. I know you will. But Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning. For those that want to maybe pick your brain, reach out, know more about the channel, how can they best reach out to you and find T-Minus365?
Yeah, definitely check out the channel at T-Minus365 on YouTube. You can just search for that; it'll come up. And you can subscribe for. I do try to do at least weekly updates and things like that as well. And then on my site, the T-Minus365.com, there's a place you can subscribe as well too, to get monthly newsletters from me, just about the posts that I've come out with, or any new guides as well too, just for heightened communications. It's usually the best type of way to contact. You could also just email me as well at MSP for MSPs, the number 4 at T-Minus.com. That will be something I respond less frequently to, just because I get like a lot of requests throughout those other channels as well too, that I try to respond. But those are great ways to reach out. And I post content weekly on LinkedIn and in the MSP Reddit. So those are good places to look too.
Perfect. We'll make sure we have all that information in the show notes as this episode goes live. Mr. Rick Smith, what's your final words for this Thursday morning to our beautiful listeners?
Well, 2 things. One, first and foremost, thanks, Nick, for your time. I think what you have to offer is awesome, and I look forward to diving in a little bit more on your channel and gaining some more knowledge. And to our listeners, same thing. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, TechCon Unplugged's coming up. December 7th to the 10th. So go to TechConUnplugged.com to get your tickets. It's going to be my sign off every week.
Well, you heard it from Mr. Smith himself. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday to catch the video podcast on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged or the audio podcast. We are on all of your favorite podcatchers, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We want to thank you. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.